I'm Evelyn Carter, 31 years old, and I built Carter & Coers, a digital branding agency now worth over $7.5 million from a cluttered one-bedroom apartment and sheer desperation. I didn't grow up with opportunities handed to me. I grew up in a rundown two-bedroom home in Topeka, Kansas, where the roof leaked more often than my parents admitted we were broke. My dad worked double shifts at the mill, and my mom clipped coupons like it was a second job. But no matter how bad it got, they always made excuses for my younger brother Bryce. He was the dreamer, the sensitive one, the one whose asthma and anxiety attacks justified why he didn't finish high school, why he never held a job longer than a season, why he needed all the attention while I worked two jobs and still got straight A's. By the time I was 14, I'd memorized every sale aisle in the grocery store, learned how to make $5 stretch for a week, and quietly handed over birthday money when Mom couldn't pay the electric bill. Bryce. He got a refurbished drum set, a flat-screen TV, and the space to find himself. I got silence and responsibility. I didn't complain. I thought that's what love looked like, sacrifice. That if I just worked hard enough, gave enough, they'd see me too. At 19, I walked into my first business class with 3 hours of sleep and a $700 loan from my high school principal. I devoured textbooks on marketing like they were lifelines. When I met Leo, my now co-founder, in our sophomore year, he had the tech brilliance I lacked. We sketched Carter & Co. on the back of a cafeteria napkin while eating expired protein bars and sharing Wi-Fi from the campus library parking lot. I never imagined success would make me a target, that the very people I bled for, who I sent money to every holiday, paid rent for, when times got hard and bought a damn house for, would see my life's work not as my victory, but as their entitlement. But I learned the hard way. Sometimes the biggest betrayal doesn't come from strangers or rivals. It comes from the people who raised you, who smiled at your wins while calculating how to slice them apart. And I didn't even see it coming, until the night they told me my shares were no longer mine. But before that moment, I still believed they were proud of me. I still believed this was about family. That illusion would shatter soon enough. I should have known something was off when my father called and said, "We need to talk about the future of the company." It was the first time he'd ever acknowledged Carter & Co. as more than Evelyn's little internet thing. For years, they acted like my business was a hobby, an accident that went too far. Now, all of a sudden, it mattered. I was suspicious, but a small part of me, still that obedient daughter who wired money every Christmas without being asked, wanted to believe it was progress. Growth. Maybe pride. I was wrong. They invited me over for Sunday dinner. The smell of Mom's lemon chicken filled the kitchen, just like when I was little. Bryce sat at the head of the table, legs crossed, wearing a suit that didn't fit him. He gave me that smug, self-satisfied smile, like he knew something I didn't. My stomach turned. Still, I smiled back. Evelyn, my dad, began clearing his throat like he was about to give a eulogy. "Your mother and I made a decision, one that's best for everyone." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were signed documents, legal transfers of 20% of Carter & Comer's shares. From them to Bryce. I laughed at first. I genuinely thought it was a prank. "This is a joke, right? You're not serious." Mom placed her hand on mine. "Sweetheart, Bryce has been struggling for so long. He just needs something stable. You have so much already." Bryce chimed in. "I'm going to help you run the brand strategy side. I have ideas." I couldn't breathe. That 20% was what I'd gifted them years ago, an emotional gesture. A way to say, "You raised me. Thank you." I never thought they'd weaponize that gift. But now they had handed my company my sweat, my sacrifice, my life's work to the boy who never even finished community college. I stood up, voice shaking. "You gave my company to someone who's never held a real job," Bryce grinned. "Correction, you gave it to them. They just passed it on. That's how family works." "No, that's how betrayal works. That's how entitlement infects everything you've tried to protect." I walked out without dessert, without goodbye, without looking back. The next morning, I showed up at the office and realized something worse. Bryce had already begun forwarding internal emails to his new consultant. He'd changed the company's Instagram bio to family-owned vision. I felt like I was watching a stranger break into my home and hang their photo over mine. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not just for the business. For the girl I used to be, the one who thought loyalty was armor, who believed if she just kept giving, eventually someone would give back. I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching silent dissolutions, legal restructuring, and corporate protection plans. If they wanted to play dirty, they were going to learn exactly who they were dealing with. What would you do if your own family turned on you? If they twisted your love into leverage and handed it off like spare change? Comment below, I want to hear your story. And if you've ever been burned by betrayal that came with a familiar face, subscribe now. Your voice matters. Your truth deserves a place to breathe. Let's make sure no one else feels alone in this fight. The betrayal didn't stop at the share transfer. That was just the first slice. What followed was a calculated dismantling of everything I had built with my own family, smiling through it like they were doing me a favor. Within 2 weeks, Bryce was sitting in my office chair. Not figuratively, literally. He parked himself at my desk and told the staff he was co-leading the brand vision now. He'd never pitched a campaign, managed a deadline, or sat through a single client crisis. And yet there he was, rearranging the floor plan, asking my assistant to cancel meetings he deemed non-essential, and suggesting we pivot toward crypto ads because that's where the buzz is. I wanted to scream. Instead, I observed. I documented. And I stayed silent outwardly. Inside, I was on fire. Then came the staff meeting I'll never forget. Bryce stood up in front of my entire team and announced a new direction. He called it the Carter Renaissance, as if he had birthed the company himself, and my parents, sitting in the back like proud spectators, nodding along completely oblivious, or worse, entirely complicit. I clenched my jaw through the entire charade because I knew something they didn't. I had already hired a lawyer. What they never realized was that the 20% shares they transferred only gave Bryce limited power. The remaining 80% was still mine. But I'd spent the last month funneling that control into a new LLC, building a parallel entity behind the scenes. I named it Phoenix 8 after the 8 times I'd rebuilt my life from ashes they left behind. I kept it quiet, registered it out of state, and transferred every client who mattered under its umbrella. But the final straw wasn't the power grab or the public humiliation. It was what Bryce did to Mila. Mila was one of our earliest employees. She'd been with me since our coffee-stained napkin sketches, working 14-hour days for next to nothing, just because she believed in the vision. Bryce fired her. No explanation, no notice. Just walked her out with security because she wasn't aligned with the new energy. I watched her cry in the parking lot. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was staring down something far uglier. They weren't trying to help the business. They were trying to erase me from it. So I smiled. I clapped at Bryce's fake town hall. And the next morning, I pulled every plug they thought they had access to. Contracts were voided. Clients were notified. Systems were locked. My attorney issued cease and desists to every department under the Carter and Carter name. Then I sent out a press release. Evelyn Carter launches Phoenix 8, a future-focused agency for brands with backbone. The backlash was instant. Clients jumped ship. Vendors called confused. And my phone blew up first with rage from Bryce, then with desperate texts from my mom asking, "Why are you doing this to us?" To us. That word. That entitlement. As if I owed them my spine. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent one final company-wide message through Carter and Cobo's email system before the servers were shut down. It read, "Vision isn't inherited, it's earned. Thank you to everyone who knew the difference." I didn't sleep that night, but not because I was grieving. I felt peace for the first time in months. And if you're watching this and you've ever been used, discarded, or stolen from by the very people you trusted, most know this. You are not crazy, you are not weak, and you are not alone. Keep watching. The reckoning hasn't even begun. After the launch of Phoenix 8, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Bryce and my parents didn't retreat like I expected. They regrouped. They retaliated. And they tried to ruin me all over again this time, not through the company, but through my reputation. That's when the betrayal turned venomous. 3 days after the press release went live, an anonymous email blast hit every major marketing board and PR blog in the country. It accused me of poaching clients, breaching NDAs, even stealing intellectual property. The subject line read, Evelyn Carter's Hidden Agenda. My name smeared in bold on every industry gossip thread. I sat at my desk in shock, heart pounding, as screenshots poured in from friends and former clients asking if the rumors were true. The message was clear: if they couldn't take my company, they'd take my credibility. At first, I denied the possibility. My own parents wouldn't do that, right? But then I traced the metadata. Yes, I hired a forensic IT firm, and it led straight back to my father's personal laptop. He didn't even bother to cover his tracks, or maybe he just didn't think I'd be smart enough to trace it. That's the thing about people who pretend you're less than. They never expect you to come prepared for war. I called my attorney. Sue them, I said, all three of them. But then I hesitated. Not out of mercy, out of calculation. Dragging my family through court would make headlines. It would make me look petty, maybe even vindictive. I didn't want revenge in the tabloids. I wanted justice that would last. So I chose something quieter, something more permanent. I made a list: every deal, every contract, every personal favor I had ever granted them. From the Christmas Eve wire transfer that bailed Bryce out of tax debt to the campaign I designed for free that got my dad's friend re-elected to city council. I had proof of every dollar, every favor, every invoice I'd never sent, because back then I thought that's what love meant. Then I sent them the list. With a simple note effective immediately: I'm collecting. I revoked my mother's access to the downtown condo she used for her charity work. I pulled funding from Bryce's rental property, which I discovered was actually in my name. I even froze the joint trust I had set up for future family investments. Suddenly, they were gasping like fish out of water, shocked that I could play the same game they'd taught me. They begged for meetings. They texted apologies that sounded more like PR statements. We're sorry if you felt hurt, not, we're sorry we betrayed you. And then came the visit. Bryce showed up at my office, uninvited, flowers in hand, that same smirk painted across his face, like none of this was real. He said, Come on, Evelyn, this is just business. We're still family. I stood up, took the flowers, and tossed them into the trash can between us. You're right, I said. It was just business. And you're about to find out what happens when I treat you like a competitor instead of a brother. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I watched his confidence wilt right in front of me. That night, I opened my old family photo albums, ones I hadn't touched in years. I flipped through birthdays, vacations, fake smiles frozen in time. I used to wonder how people could smile like that and still choose to destroy you. Now I knew. Smiles lie. Blood lies. But numbers, paperwork, contracts, they tell the truth. I burned the album in the backyard fire pit, watched the pages curl, the memories melt, and when it was over, I stood there in the smoke and silence, and finally understood they never saw me as one of them. I was just an asset, but not anymore. This was the part where most people would retreat. Forgive, pretend. But I wasn't most people. I had walked through their fire, and now I was using the ashes to build something they'd never touch again. This wasn't just business. This was personal. And the reckoning wasn't over yet. After Bryce left my office humiliated, I thought the storm had passed. But when it comes to family, who only sees your success as their property, there's always another scheme brewing behind the curtain. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. Not from a lawyer. From a probate court. My grandfather's estate had been quietly reopened. The same grandfather who raised me for 4 years when my parents were too stressed to handle both kids. The man who used to call me his little legacy. Apparently, his original will had been amended without my knowledge just months before his death. And guess who now had full control over his 70-acre farmland and private investment trust, Bryce. My hands shook reading the document. Bryce had sold the land, my grandfather's land, just 5 days earlier to a development firm. And the trust, he'd liquidated it into an account under his name, and moved to a new luxury condo downtown. I called the court, I called the notary, and every time I hit the same wall, the documents appear valid. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That land was supposed to be mine. It was the one thing my grandfather had promised me directly. I still remembered the sound of his voice when he said, "This will be yours one day, Evelyn. Use it to build something real." It was clear now my family wasn't just trying to erase me. They were rewriting history. The rage I felt wasn't loud. It was cold, focused. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, it builds strategy. I hired a private investigator. If they were going to play dirty, I'd come clean with receipts. And oh, did I find more than I bargained for. Bryce hadn't just manipulated the trust. He'd used my mother's nonprofit as a shell account. Donors' funds rerouted into personal travel consulting invoices, signed off by my father, even ghost employees. Everything connected, everything corrupt, and everything traceable. I contacted the IRS. I submitted anonymous evidence to the state attorney general. Then I sat back and waited. Within 3 weeks, their world started cracking. My mother's foundation was placed under audit. Bryce's bank account was frozen. My father's consulting license was suspended pending investigation. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, they couldn't call me crying for help. Because this time, I was the storm. But the real heartbreak didn't come from watching them fall. It came from discovering a voicemail on my old burner phone, one I hadn't used in years, still stored in a drawer. It was from my grandfather, dated just 10 days before his death. His voice, frail but clear, said, "Evelyn, if anything happens, don't let them touch the land. It's yours. Always was. They've been pressuring me, but I won't sign anything. Promise me you'll fight." I broke down, right there on the floor, clutching that phone like it was his hand. He tried to protect me. He knew. But they got to him anyway. And now even the grave couldn't protect his final wish. I made a choice that night. I wasn't going to fight them just for justice anymore. I was going to fight to restore his name, his values, and everything he stood for. I wasn't just his legacy. I was going to be the reckoning his name deserved. I filed a civil suit to challenge the probate amendment. I brought in voice analysis handwriting experts and the original farm staff who confirmed my grandfather's clear intent. The legal fees were enormous, the emotional toll worse. But every day I walked into court, I carried his name like armor. And I watched my parents and brother shrink under the weight of truth. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't the obedient daughter anymore. I was the woman they built from neglect, forged in betrayal, and underestimated one final time. And as I walked out of court on the day the judge ruled the will invalid and reinstated my grandfather's original terms, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply looked my brother in the eye and said, "You may have gotten the land, Bryce, but I got justice. And that's something you can't sell." But even that wasn't the end, because what they tried to destroy, I was about to rebuild on a foundation they could never touch, not out of spite, but out of purpose. For my grandfather, for the girl they tried to erase, and for every woman who's ever been betrayed by the people she once called home. Winning the case didn't heal the wound, it just stopped the bleeding. The court's decision gave me back my grandfather's land and legacy, but it couldn't restore what they stole from me emotionally. The years of manipulation, of being treated like an ATM with a heartbeat, didn't just vanish because a judge agreed with me. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because justice is one thing, closure is something entirely different. I had that farmland in my name again. But instead of selling it or developing it for profit, like Bryce tried to do, I poured the last of my savings into restoring it. Every inch. Every beam of the old barn. Every brick of the crumbling farmhouse. I hired local contractors, young women, starting out single moms, like my own mother used to be, before greed swallowed her whole. I called the project Legacy Acres. And I didn't just rebuild it. I turned it into something my grandfather would have cried to see: a retreat and mentorship hub for underprivileged young women in business. Not a resort, not a spa. A real working space to build companies, grow gardens, write code pitch products, and finally believe they were worth something. The opening was modest, quiet, just a ribbon and a hand-painted sign that read, "Built from Betrayal." now standing for purpose. A handful of women came, then a few dozen more. By fall, we had 70 applications for residency. But as I was building something good, my family was crumbling in the spotlight. The media got wind of the fraud charges. The state froze more of my mother's accounts. My father tried to claim ignorance and filed for bankruptcy only to be exposed as co-signatory on 3 ghost charities under investigation. And Bryce. He lost his condo, his Range Rover, and his girlfriend all in 1 week. Watching him go live on Instagram to whine about family turning on family while begging for donations was the kind of irony even I couldn't script. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But what finally broke me came in the form of a letter. Not from a lawyer, not from a judge, from my mother. A handwritten, shaky apology on yellowed stationery. It started with "Dear Evelyn" and ended with, "I only did what I thought was best for your brother. I hope someday you understand. Understand I was the one who paid their bills for 5 years. The one who called every holiday just to hear them lie through their teeth about being proud of me while stealing everything they could behind my back. I was the one who gave them everything while they left me out of every family decision, told relatives I was too busy to attend events I wasn't even invited to, and they wanted understanding I didn't reply. Instead, I framed that letter and hung it on the wall of the main hall at Legacy Acres. Beneath it, I placed a bronze plaque with the words, "This is what generational guilt looks like. Break the cycle, or become it." People stared when they walked past it. Some cried. Some nodded like they'd seen that same handwriting in their own lives. That plaque became our most talked about feature. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying the people who betrayed you, it's creating something they can never touch, never diminish, never claim credit for. My grandfather used to say, "Evelyn, you plant trees you'll never sit under." I finally understood what that meant. Legacy isn't just about money or land or family names. It's about impact. And nothing burns a betrayer more than seeing the person they tried to break thrive without them. I still walk those acres every morning. The fog settles low, and the grass feels cold under my boots. But the silence is mine now. Peaceful. Whole. I don't look over my shoulder anymore. I don't answer unknown calls. And I no longer crave their approval, because I finally gave that approval to myself. And in the quiet moments when I sit under the willow tree my grandfather planted with me when I was 8, I know I've honored him. Not just with the court win, not just with the land, but with who I became in the aftermath. They tried to rewrite my story, but I built a whole new book, and this time I'm the author. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real revenge. Some people think revenge ends with a courtroom victory or a bank account restored, but they don't know the kind of betrayal that stains your bones. After all the court hearings, media fallout, and public disgrace of my so-called family, I thought I might finally feel whole. Instead, I felt hollow. Not broken, just tired. Tired of carrying the weight of people who never truly loved me, only used me until I no longer served their version of family. Every now and then, someone asks if I regret not fighting sooner. My answer, I regret waiting as long as I did. I regret silencing myself for years, thinking that loyalty meant absorbing pain. That family meant forgiveness with no accountability. That love looked like sacrifice, even when it became self-destruction. But I don't regret what I've done since, because now Legacy Acres is more than land, it's a fortress of truth. A sanctuary where other women come not to be rescued, but to remember their own power. The women I mentor remind me daily that betrayal is common, but so is rebirth. We host weekly fire pit story circles where women share the one lie they were raised to believe, and the moment they knew it was a lie. One woman said, "My mother told me I'd never be loved unless I stayed quiet." Another whispered, "My father said I was nothing without his money." And then, one night, as the flames crackled low and the wind picked up, I finally spoke my own truth aloud. My family loved me. As long as I was useful. The silence that followed was electric. One woman reached for my hand. Another nodded, tears in her eyes. That night, I realized something vital. The point of my story wasn't just about the pain. It was about the healing that follows if you're brave enough to demand it. The most surprising twist came last spring when Bryce sent me an email. Just a subject line: I need help. No apology. No ownership. Just the same desperation he always operated from, assuming I'd be there to clean it up. I didn't open it. I deleted it without reading. That was the moment I knew I had finally broken the cycle, for good. I don't know where my parents are now. Rumors swirl, they moved out of state, changed numbers, maybe even changed their names. I don't chase closure anymore. Closure isn't something you get from them, it's something you choose for yourself. And I chose mine the day I turned their lies into a legacy. Now, when people ask me what I do, I don't say I run a branding empire. I say I help women rewrite betrayal into blueprints. That's my legacy now. So if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or flat out betrayed by the people you trusted, most know this: you are not alone. And you don't have to let their actions define your worth or your future. You can build something they'll never take from you. You can write your story in ink they can't erase. And one day, they'll realize the fire they lit under you didn't destroy you, it forged you. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support gives power to voices like mine.